All right, so now you guys are all memorialized, so be careful what you say. Um, all right, so we are going to kind of jump right into this, and I wanted to start off with just this statement or saying from Steve Harney, who was the founder of Keeping Current Matters. I know many of you, I think, subscribe to Keeping Current Matters, but he was always known for this quote, which is, "There's no such thing as good news or bad news. It's just the news." And, we're going to start there. And for those that watched my BombBomb video last week to kind of promote this impromptu market update, it was kind of in response to the headline coming out about the latest information on new home sales and how they fell 16.6% in April. And of course, we, as mass media typically does, they love to, sell papers or headlines or whatever. We've got things like recession warning, new home sales plunge, CNBC sales of newly built homes tumbled over 16% in April while prices soared. So that was just one. And then I said, we've got other things that are going to be coming out in the next couple of days. And, we've had additional headlines come out. I'll just share those most recent ones in the last 7 days alone. This was one regarding pending home sales, and pending home sales descend 3.9% in April. Again, they like to use that word plunge. Forbes, pending home sales plunged to lowest level in nearly a decade. Worse could be yet to come. And then you see so forth and so on. And then this past Tuesday, not even a couple of days ago, you guys probably, many of you saw, the Case-Shiller came out. And with that, we have headlines like home prices surged to over 20% in March. Home prices soared. U.S. home prices rise at a new record rate. So in less than a week, we've got headlines coming out anywhere from new home sales plunge, pending home sales drop, and now prices are rising. And they all just kind of are conflicting, and I'm sure that it's creating some confusion in the marketplace for consumers, certainly, buyers, sellers, probably agents. And so what I was hoping that we could do today is spend a little bit of time just kind of doing a deeper dive into kind of these three components, talk a little bit about what's happening specifically in the Atlanta marketplace, because in a lot of cases, these are national numbers, national headlines. And really, again, with the hope that you guys feel a little more comfortable about maybe where this market is going, at least in the immediate 60 to 90 day, future here through the summer. And again, so as your clients are asking you, well, what do you think is going to happen? At least you've got some data behind you and some talking points to substantiate whatever it is, whatever your commentary is going to be as it relates to, what's happening in the market. So we're going to start off first with just this latest new homes report. And again, down 17% in the latest findings for April. And again, you got to remember, this is April. We won't get May's numbers probably until sometime the end of this month. And it really is for, the number of sales that are coming in the pipeline. But a couple of things to remember as it relates to new homes. Number one is it accounts for about 10% of the overall marketplace. So while it, there is bearing, and maybe, some could argue it is kind of like a look into the future of, what might be happening in the new construction arena, it really is only a tenth of the overall marketplace in terms of what's happening in the market. So keep that in mind. The other thing too is it is a national number. So the 17% decline is a national number and isn't necessarily completely reflective of what's happening locally here in the Atlanta marketplace. So, I think that, and I'd love to just get some commentary or feedback. I see we've got, Kalita on here, who is, sitting in a new home community. Also, Bob Freeman, there might be some others that are sitting in our Grandview community. and for those of you that are working with buyers and looking at new construction right now, do you really feel like that there's been a significant decline in the buyer activity for new homes specific to Atlanta, especially in light of the fact of the inventory challenges that we're having? So feel free to chime in or put something in the chat.
Todd, I'll throw in a couple of things. One, I'm curious about how that number is accounted for, because as we know, a lot of new home sales are off market. They're not transacted through the MLS. So that's one point. Secondly, just anecdotal, I've had resale buyers throw their hands up in frustration and said, I can't win the bids. I'm going to go to new construction. And I'll just be patient and wait.
Yeah. So the new homes report is something that comes on out from the National Home Builders, and really it's kind of just a poll, and basically they poll all the new home builders out there and kind of get a sense of kind of what they're seeing in their communities. So that's where some of that information is coming from. Sherry made the point too in the chat here that new homes builders, they're sold out. They don't have any available lots. And right now too, builders are not building spec homes. So they don't have standing inventory in most cases where somebody can just go in, put a contract in and close in a couple of days. So, some of the reason for the decline too is just because, especially as Bob, supply chain issues and not being able to complete houses. And I've got a community not too far from where I live that sat empty for almost a year. They did the pre-sale lot reservations and it took them a year, and now everything's coming up. Like within the last 30 days. So again, just remember that this is a national number and not necessarily completely reflective of what's happening in the local market. Mary Ellen's put in here also the escalation clauses that many builders put in their contracts scares buyers. Absolutely true. But so I want to move on though to what potential builder impacts this news has, because this isn't the first time that the report's been down. It's been a trend that's been happening over the last several months. But I do believe, as many of you have been experiencing and sharing with your brokers and has been passed along to myself and Jenny is, builders offering lower commissions, 2%, things of that nature. Basically, having these situations where, they release one lot at a time and there's a bidding war for that lot. I think that this is necessarily not a bad thing to see a headline like this, because maybe it's going to loosen that up a little bit and give more opportunity for buyers. And, as we move forward, because builders have PTSD from the downturn. And so many of them, more or less got put out of business, to where I don't think that we're ever going to see a situation, at least in the very, very, foreseeable future. And by that, I mean 5 to 10 years, where we're going to get, number one, upsided on standing inventory from a new construction standpoint. But secondly, even if we were to, I don't think that we're going to see the spec building that we saw back in the days of the 2005, 2006, where we had significantly more supply than we have now. I just don't think builders are going to do that. And so I think that we're going to kind of, again, be in a situation where it's going to be kind of build on demand versus just kind of putting it out there and letting people come and buy it. So got something in here from Isabella. Taylor Morrison is now offering 3% on base price plus a bonus on their 2 new communities in downtown Alpharetta. And weren't they one of the ones that were quick to reduce commissions? I know that who's the group out of Canada that kind of jumped into the foray there first? Yeah, Sherry, go ahead.
So it's very interesting. Hey, everybody, for those that don't know me, but I'm the broker here in Forsyth. I actually had a new homes agent did a broker drop for my office about 3 weeks ago. And we haven't had if you don't know what a broker drop is, it's where they come by and they bring information or they leave candy or something trying to get you to come out to their neighborhoods. It's the first time we've had that probably in 2 years. And it's Century Communities. And I asked her, I'm like, you're the first person that's been here in 2 years. What's going on? And she goes, well, my communities, we have available lots and we're trying to pre-sale instead of doing specs. They don't want to do specs, just what Todd was saying. So they want their pre-sale business to ramp up because with the market so unstable, you know, with prices and stuff, they had rather do their pre-sales than to spend the money on specs. So I found that extremely interesting. I went out a couple weeks ago too, just kind of finding some new home communities for my agents to give them options, you know, for their clients. Spoke to every on-site agent and discussed the 2% because I see Taylor Morrison's offering 3, but that's amazing. But most of them are only offering 2. And the on-site agents recognize how bad that is for you guys. And they are going to bat for you with their management team, but their management team is not budging yet. No, they think it's going to do a turnaround in the next 6 to 12 months where that's going to go back to 3. But right now they're saying it's still going to keep it 2 until we get out of this crisis that we seem to be in right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is driven by supply chain and some of the other stuff that I've been reading from like Zelman and Associates, who does tracks a lot of new home builder stuff too, is, you know, I see Beezer in here from Lisa Walters, you know, still offering a 2% up in Kennesaw. But, you know, most of these are national builders. And if they're feeling a pinch in other markets, you know, and continue to see declines of, you know, sales overall, I think that they're going to come a little bit looser on the purse strings and are going to start maybe offering slightly higher buyer commissions to us, which is, again, a good thing for all of you as agents, but then also too for the buyers as well. And then I just kind of put in there, you know, what could be potential impacts to sellers from a resale standpoint. Kind of saw in a chat group last week how this news, even though it was related to new homes, kind of alarmed, for lack of a better word, a person who was thinking about putting their home on the market and, you know, got a little tentative about, oh my gosh, does this mean that prices are dropping in general? So again, that's why a headline like this, you know, does have a trickle over effect into other markets, but just factor that all in as, you know, somebody says, hey, I just saw this latest thing about, you know, new home sales down 17%. So just some talking points for you to kind of be mindful of as you get challenged on some of that. The next thing I want to do is move into the Case-Shiller. And this is the latest Case-Shiller for Atlanta specifically. And if you click I included the little hyperlink. And so when we send the slides out, you can click the hyperlink if you want to be taken directly to this graph that I have here. But to the left here, I've showed basically what the results were for March. Now, again, this is a trailing index that trails basically 2 full months behind where the market currently is. So, you know, I've said that before, but keep that in mind. But for March in Atlanta, the index was at 219.6. The February index was 212.9. So that was a 3.1% month over month increase. And again, this is only for resale homes. And the way the Case-Shiller, the way the data is collected is the house has to have sold. It's not new construction, so it has to have had changed hands one time in order for it to get counted. But if you look back in the index where it was a year ago in March, it was at 174.7. So if you do the math on that, that was a 25.7% increase year over year for resale homes, or you could call that appreciation if you wanted to, for Atlanta. Now, but there are 2 things I want you to keep in mind as you're contemplating the latest news coming out of Case-Shiller. This is for March. Interest rates in March were 3.85%. In May, they're 5.5%. And we just saw today how yesterday how they budged up again. They were at 5.5, dropped a little bit, and now they're moving back up. I think we're going to see that roller coaster on interest rates for a while now. But I'm going to show you an illustration of the impact not only of interest rate, but of appreciation and what that has done to the cost of owning a home in a little bit. And you can kind of see what the impact has been over the last year. So, but again, we're looking at data for March where the interest rates were significantly different than where they are today. Most people, when they see a headline like that, first of all, don't know, that it's a trailing index. And then secondly, they're not even thinking about what the interest rates were back in March. Now the average days too, think of this. The average days right now from when a house goes binding and then actually closes is 36 days. So if you factor that in, and so these March closings were actually for homes that went under contract either the end of January or in early February. So if you think about it in those terms, we're seeing the results of properties that went under contract now in this time period 4 months ago, 4.5 months ago. And with the way that the market has really kind of been moving lately, that back in January and February, it was a way different market than it is today. So again, when you look at this information, I mean, the data is the data, not trying to, say it isn't, but it isn't necessarily reflective of where we are today. And I have been saying that I think that over time, we're going to see this trend slow down. I don't think we're going to see, I think it's going to flatten, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So instead of like 25.7%, as we get into the next index, which will be in June, reporting for April and July and so forth and so on, I think we're going to see that begin to decelerate, which is what, I mentioned when we got together back in April when we did the Q1 update. So expect to see that, expect to see things like deceleration in pricing, and don't think that that is necessarily a decline in overall home values. So we're going to talk about, because I shared the pending index here, and I'm going to go into pending next, but it really kind of just begs the question of, okay, so where are we going now? I mean, we've already talked about seasonality in the market. May was a very interesting month in terms of overall activity. We started to hear things from all of you in the field of, I put the house on the market and it's been on the market now for 2 weeks, and my seller is asking me, why isn't my house sold? I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that because there just isn't quite the demand out there that there once used to be. But that's okay. For those of you that have been in the business for a while, that typically the typical time on market in normal market conditions is anywhere from 45 to 60 days. That was not uncommon for us going back into like even 16, 17, 18. That wasn't uncommon. It's just that we've gotten so accustomed to things going on the market just as soon, or going under contract just as soon as they go on the market, that, when something stays on the market for a while, we wonder, well, what's going on? Why hasn't it sold? So what I want to look at though is what happened in May in the 6 core county area in FMLS, and the sold summary first. We're going to start there, and you're going to look at this and you're going to think, yep, I felt that. That's exactly what I felt in May, because we had a lot of agents saying, what the heck is going on? It seems like the market's just come to a halt. And it probably did in a little ways. But I think some of it is because really, truly, for the first time, even, though last year we had graduations and things of that nature, this May was the first May where really things felt kind of like they used to feel. There were graduations, there was people going on vacations, all of that kind of thing. Historically is always a pause or a disruptor to what's going on. It's part of that seasonality component of the market. But this is what happened. So if we compare 2021 to 2022, and I'm going to talk about why we probably want to stop doing that as we move forward and get into kind of more normalization of a market, we saw a 31% year-over-year decline in the total number of homes that closed or sold in May. So pretty significant. However, the total days on market didn't change. It was still very low. It was 16 days. And we saw the median price appreciation of 21.2%. So again, good sales, despite the maybe the decline in demand a little bit, we still saw prices holding and people still willing to pay well above list price. We'll talk about how many people paid above list price in a little bit. The homes requiring a price reduction, we didn't see a lot of movement there either. We saw it tick up a little bit, but only 12% of the homes that closed in May sold for that required a price reduction in order to attract an offer. It was 10.7% a year ago in May. In May. So For reference point though, 30% is what is normal in a normal market. In other words, 30% or almost a third of the overall inventory that closes under kind of more normal market conditions, 30% of them miss the mark on pricing. So that's an indicator for all of you to begin watching as sellers are asking you, where's the market going? Where are we going in terms of pricing and everything else? As we get closer and closer to that 30% unsold inventory, that's going to be your cue of reaching the ceiling in terms of tolerance of buyers and pricing and their ability to afford homes on the market. So I would say that, you know, as we start getting into that 20% to 22 to 23, that's going to be a cue of, okay, we might be peaking or plateauing out here. The number of homes to sell above original list price in May, 70%. So 7 out of 10 homes sold for above asking price. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that percentage above asking price was in a little bit. It was 62% last May. So again, despite the fact that we have interest rates that rose in May, we have people paying, willing to pay in 7 out of 10 cases, well above asking price and 8% more than they did last year. So for May closings, the average length of time for when the property was listed though until it closed was 53 days. So from the minute it goes on the market, goes binding, and then hits the closing table is 53 days. So keep that in mind though, these are closings that occurred in May. In 53 days, what does that mean? We're literally still looking at transactions, listings that came on in March, when the fundamentals were a little bit different than they are today, before interest rates really started going up, which didn't happen until the end of April, beginning of May. So, you know, we've got some things here. This is kind of like, and the reason I share this with you is if you'll watch for these signs moving forward, looking back a couple of months, you're going to be able to predict or project what's going to happen as we enter the months of June, July, and August, and have more kind of complete conversations with your sellers. And then again, I've already pointed out what were interest rates back in March, certainly different than what they are today. Let's talk about pending summary. Well, before I move on, any questions or any comments or anything as it relates to the solds for May for the 6 core county? And this is for single family residents only. It doesn't include condos and townhomes. I'm going to talk about condos and townhomes in a little bit. Let me see, we got something in the chat here. I think we're going to have more listings priced too high. I agree, Grace, until we get to that point where we get above 20%, 23% of homes having to do a price reduction, sellers will continue to test and challenge the market. So this is all data, Cynthia. So this is kind of the, you know, it's the 6 core county. So it's going to be, you know, data for the 6 core county, not just for FMLS. All right, so pending summary again, this is for 6 core, and I'm going to get into just general FMLS too in a little bit, just to be more reflective of the overall greater Atlanta marketplace. For the pendings, the total days on market remained unchanged too, it was 15 days. For homes requiring a price reduction, 15%, so slightly more than the 12 that we saw for the sold. So we're already seeing some signs of getting closer and closer to that 20 because of the things that went under contract in May. 15% of those properties had a price reduction. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, but we're moving in a trend direction towards higher and higher on a monthly basis. The median original list price for all of that inventory that went under contract was $455. The median of the original list price of non-reductions was $466,990. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we can kind of anticipate, and we'll see how good my math is here on what to expect as we move into June with respect to price appreciation. Because in May, the homes that closed and didn't have to reduce their price sold on average for 7.2% above original list price. So the slide before where I said that 70% of the homes that sold sold for above asking price, the average of that amount that they sold for above asking price was 7.2% in May. So, you know, so if a house was on the market for 400,000 and it sold for above asking price, it probably sold for around the 428 range, is kind of why you had that there. Of the homes that had to do a price reduction, they sold for about 8% below their original list price. So if I know that 85% of the homes sold without having to reduce their price and 15% sold with having to do a price reduction, if I take the weighted average of that, I'm expecting the median sale price for May pendings, which we'll see closing in June and early July, is going to be around 489,000, which is going to be about a 1.8% month over month increase and a 17.8% increase compared to June of 2021. So we were at 25, and if the math holds true, then we're actually going to start to see some of that deceleration in pricing going into June and July based on sales or things that go under contract in May and June. So let me just pause on that for a second and see if there's any questions, or I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm suggesting there.
I have a question. This is Ann Jensen. Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
Ann.
So are you saying that even with increased interest rates, which by the end of June, I mean, they could be approaching even closer to 6, that the statistics show that we're still going to be 17.8% year over year?
It does. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second here about historically when interest rates have rise, prices also rise. We see a slight decline in the number of transactions that take place, but historically over 7 different periods of time, that's typically been the case.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So, and again, the reason I bring that up is because the messaging for buyers is you really don't want to wait. You don't want to try and time the market because prices are just going to continue to rise. And a big portion of that too, Ann, has to do with this just crazy inverse supply demand dynamic that we've got going on. And like we talked about in April, we still have first-time home buyers. We saw a decline in the number of overall first-time home buyers over the last month. It was 32% in April. It was 28% in May. But first-time home buyers represent the largest, and I'm talking the age demographic from 26 to 32 represents the largest demographic of buyers in the marketplace. And they're typically first-time home buyers, and they still have a lot of ways to go to buy homes. So I don't see the demand falling off or dropping off because we got more and more that still need to buy homes, which is going to drive pricing as well. Is there a casual or causal relationship between interest rates rising and prices rising? Just the only thing I know to answer that, Sue, is the historically, you know, and I think, and again, with us being in the supply demand situation that we are, we're not in the same circumstance that we were before the recession. The month's supply and the available inventory back in 2006, 2007, when interest rates were at levels higher than what they currently are today. I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a company, Metro Brokers, that used to have a billboard that used to show how much available inventory. They had them all over town. And I can remember that thing got up to 65 and 70,000 units. And now if you're looking at my slide now, we're talking a tenth of that, 7,700 units. And again, we're just so upside down from a supply standpoint right now and still have significant demand, even though many people have gotten priced out of the market, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. There are still people there who can afford and pay these prices. So what we're going to look at here now is just, I'm really going to focus more on the today's stats section than looking at the area above here. And the reason is because April and May was April and May. I want to really more focus on where we see the market going moving forward. And so you've got a couple things to take a look at here. The first thing is the available inventory for sale. And again, this is just single family residential, doesn't include condo and townhome. I've broken that out in a separate slide for you. But we currently had almost 7,800 homes for sale through the month of May. If we compare that to April a month ago, it's about a 14.1% 1% increase in the available inventory or the homes available for sale. If we want to even look at it from the standpoint of throughout the first 5 months of this year, if you kind of move on over, you see the 7,800 and 6,205. That's a 25.4% increase in inventory. I want to pause on that though and put a place marker there because I want to ask the group a question about that and what that means in a moment. But I want to get through a few of the other things here that we're looking at right now. And by the way, this all comes from Trend Graphics, which each of you has access to. And I'm going to kind of show you where to quickly go get that at the end of the presentation for those who want to stick around and see that. If you're not real familiar how to do it, and go grab this information within 15 seconds. The thing I really want to focus on though is we already talked about the solds and the impact there and the declines and so forth and so on. And for the year right now, for all of FMLS, we're about 7.2% behind where we were for the same 5-month period compared to 2021. So we're down in terms of the total number of sales. We're up significantly in the total sales volume because of prices and 25% appreciation over the last month and so forth and so on. But the thing that I want to kind of focus on here is the pending. What happened with pending inventory in May? And again, a lot of, you were saying, oh my gosh, the market just feels like it fell off, it froze, it didn't do anything. Well, there was actually some pretty good activity in May compared to April. And the pendings in April are what really resulted to the closings in May, right? So if we have stronger pendings in May, I would expect that June probably will shape up to be a little bit better than May was. We'll see where we are on a year-over-year basis, but I really think that we need to get out of the habit of comparing year over year at this point, and here's why. We're moving more into, now that we're kind of really out of the pandemic and out of COVID and all of the things that lingered there, to compare the housing market to the last 2 years and all of the craziness that all of it created and this, demand and so forth and so on, I don't know that it's really necessarily fair to compare the years to years. So I would suggest almost comparing it to what was happening in 2019 when the market was more normal. And so that's what I've kind of done here for you as well. But definitely positive that the pendings were up in May. They are not too far off in the year-over-year comparison on the far right-hand side. You can see the comparison on a year-over-year basis. The pendings weren't too bad as far as what we did last May. So again, for me, positive signs is what we can expect in terms of closings going into June and July. But what I want to kind of talk about too is the absorption rate. And the absorption rate, as you may have heard me say, is at what pace is the market absorbing the inventory that's available for it to buy. And so the closed absorption rate right now for the month of May was running at about 67%. So in essence, almost for every 10 houses that went on the market still absorbed 7 out of those 10. Now the pending activity was even higher. For every 10 houses that came on, we put 9 under contract in the month of May. For reference standpoint, the absorption rate back in 19, 35%. So again, there's good, strong buyer demand there, and we're absorbing properties at a pretty significant pace. The other thing I want to point out here, and the reason I have it as asterisks, is that 29,325 in 2019 represents the total number of properties that closed in 2019. So if we look at 29,325 compared to 29,513, we actually closed more homes in 2022 than we did back in 2019. And for those that can remember that far back, which seems like forever ago, we all thought 2019 was a pretty doggone year, a good year. We started off setting sales records as a company and everything else. You'll notice too that the pending activity was slightly higher, but here's the other thing that's happening in the market right now that you guys probably can relate to. Typically rerun, and by we, I mean as a market, run at about a 20% fall through rate. So for every 10 contracts that go under or homes that go under contract, 2 of them fall through, whether it's inspection or buyer gets cold feet or whatever the case may be. Right now, we're only running at about a 13 or a 14% fall through rate. So even though the number of homes that went under contract is slightly lower than it was in 2019, we don't have as many of them falling out. So they're actually leading to closings. So that's something else to kind of be mindful of as you're looking at pending information when comparing it to previous time periods. Next thing I want to take a look at is, again, the 6 core county area for single family. So we looked at the macro, all of Atlanta, honing in now more on the 6 core county so you can kind of see the impacts there. And again, following similar trend lines to what's happening in the general overall market. Not going to spend a lot of time because it's, on this particular information, only other than to say we saw a good bump in pending activity, 5.7%. So we put more homes under contract in May than we did April. We're slightly lagging behind a little bit in the terms of the number of homes that have, closed and gone under contract in the 6 core county. And that kind of makes sense too, because there probably is more available opportunity and inventory as you get further and further outside of Atlanta. So for those that kind of work more of just the urban, core markets of the 6 core county, you know that the inventory just hasn't been there. But again, look at the absorption though. The closed absorption was 75% and the pending was basically anything that came on the market, we put under contract in May in the 6 core county. And you guys are probably still feeling that. That's why we're still feeling multiple offers. That's why we're still seeing homes, 70% of the time selling for above list price. So that's what happened in May in terms of the pending absorption, again, which is going to lead to good June results. And then finally, I do jump into the condo townhome and what's been happening there. And so you see, again, we had good, strong pending activity in May compared to April, but down significantly on a year-over-year basis at 18.3%. But despite all of that, still the absorption rate was 83% for closed and 113% for pending. So we still got good, strong buyer demand out there. So it kind of brings me to these other observations. So despite the recent rise in interest rates and an overall decline in pending activity, which there was a decline, on a year-over-year and month-over-month basis, the buyer demand for homes in Atlanta still remains strong based on the pending absorption and now results. I mean, we have anywhere from 80% to over 100%. And again, I referenced the historical perspective. The absorption rate back in May of 19 was 35%, and it was more or less, it's a balanced market when it's 20%. So even back in May of 19, it was still more of a seller's market based on a 35% absorption, but we're still clicking along at 75, 80, 85. Now, a couple months ago, that was 135, 140. So if you wanted to kind of put an analogy to it, we've gone from the rocket ship to kind of maybe the supersonic jet. And now we might be just slowing down to the regular jet, and then maybe we will get to the little prop or something like that. But that's kind of what we're feeling right now, is we've just been on this rapid pace for the last 2 years, that when things start to slow down a little bit, it just gets more amplified. And then historically, as a rise in interest rates results in a rise in sales prices and a slight decline in the number of homes. And so to the question here, and this was a graph that we shared the last time we were together, the impact of rising rates on housing. And it kind of just shows you the different periods of time, the length of time they occurred, the increase of the interest rate, and then what the final interest rate was, and then the impact it had on home prices in general. And the last time that we felt this was back in November of 12 through December of 13. There was an increase. The rate ended up being at 4.46%. And we saw home prices increase 11% and decline in the total number of sales by 2. But if you took all those time periods together and averaged them out, you see the numbers there at the very, very bottom. I recognize that we're at slightly higher interest rate than 4.46% right now, but we jumped up to 5 and then we kind of fell down, and then it went up 7 basis points over the last day or so. And so we're like in the low 5s right now. So a little bit higher, but again, you can see in other time periods, all were well above 5.3%. and what the impact there was for home prices. And all of them were in much different supply demand circumstances than we are today. Before I jump on, any other comments, questions, anything? All right. So here's the thing though, to keep in mind, if the rise of inventory in the single family sector is a result of more sellers coming to market, it's more a question. Is the rise in inventory in the single family homes that I showed you, and I'll go back to what I'm talking about, this number here. So this increase of 7779 from 6820, is that really more a result of more sellers coming to the market? Or is that a result of there just being less demand and therefore homes are just staying on the market longer for us to see? What do y'all think? Anybody? What do you think? Is the rise of inventory due to more sellers saying, yep, I'm ready to jump into the market? Or is it a result of just there being a decline in the overall number of closings and a little bit less demand as a result probably of the interest rates jumping up a little bit?
Both. Odd.
Huh?
It's gonna be a little of both.
You think a little of both?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know up in the Forsyth market, we're seeing more sellers.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think a lot of sellers were waiting through last year. And now they've gotten their act together. They've done whatever repairs they need to do, and they feel like they're gonna see the same kind of rocket appreciation this year. So I think
Well,
it's,
they're gonna still feel the appreciation. It's just not gonna keep accelerating. And that's where we're gonna have to really keep them in tune to where we were seeing month over month, 5 and 6% increases. Okay, their neighbor sold at 560, so I'm now gonna go on at 600, is where it's gonna start seeing the slowdown in the houses staying on the market, because now they're gonna chase the market down because of buyer fatigue. But I do think we are gonna see, and we need to, and that's what I think Todd's also trying. We've got to get back to what is really a healthy market. And what we've been in has not really been healthy for anyone, mentally making the right decisions, any of that. So we actually do need to see a slowdown in the market and let things recorrect itself so that we can get back to a stable market mentally and physically for everyone.
Okay. Anybody else offer an opinion?
Well, mine's just anecdotal because I'm in my little neighborhood by Chastain Park. We've had 7 sales, just ridiculous. My taxes are gonna really go up. The prices have been nuts this year, really in the past 6 months, and we haven't had 7 in the past 7 years. Some of it was just people been there for 40, 45 years. If there was ever a time to sell, this is it. And that's what people who ask me, that's my answer. You know, they really don't want to leave, don't know where they're going. If there's ever a time to sell. So I think it's more sellers jumping in the market. There is an unknown of how long this good thing will stay. That's, as I say, my personal observation of one neighborhood.
Okay.
Todd, I think she brought up a very good point that everybody should take note of, is the taxes are going to go up. You know, everybody needs to get prepared for that. And don't start screaming when it happens, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to go argue the tax bases when those letters come out, you know, a little bit later in the year here. So, and, you know, Shay put in the comments here that sellers coming to market at an inflated price without having sufficient comps to support it. I agree 100% that I think they're just kind of, you know, let's just throw it out there, see what happens. And then, you know, if it happens, great. Which maybe is a result of kind of we're seeing the days on market for actives has increased significantly because they're just kind of testing the market to see what happens. Says DeKalb County tax assessments came out this week.
Cobb County came out too.
Okay, Cobb came out. Lucky you guys. You can kind of see what's happened there.
It went up.
Yep, yep. But those are, you know, to the point, those are conversations that, you know, as you're having you know, talking to sellers specifically, that's a seller impact. I think, you know, for sure, certainly the buyers are having to, you know, pay for whatever that is, but down the line, Gwinnett and Hall have been out for a while. Okay, great. Thanks, Holly. So, well, I'm glad you guys think it's more sellers coming onto the market. Because I'm still with the number the number of homes selling above list price and the number of multiple offers still that I'm hearing, I wonder, I just kind of, again, to use Sue's word, anecdotally wonder if it is truly more sellers feeling comfortable coming onto the market, or that because we've just seen a decline in the demand and not as many people gobbling up the inventory and, you know, being 0 days on market, or sales happening and don't even get onto the market, so we don't even see that inventory reflected in the data. If maybe that is some of it too, but I'm going to go with what you guys say and say sellers, more sellers come on the market and we got more inventory, and that's a good thing for everybody. So let's see, Cherokee County getting their numbers now. Some got increases last year, others are seeing it for this year. Yeah, and Cherokee, if you remember or recall, in the one we did in April, huge year-over-year median price increases in Cherokee and Forsyth. So be interesting to see what that impact is to everybody. Going on with the other observations, Atlanta is following other overall trends in the South with respect to the decline in overall sales for single family. The expectation for the year end is a 5 to 7% decline. So just, you know, we excuse me, set a record last year of 6.2 million nationally. We're probably going to see a decline of 5 to 7%. So if you compare, again, we kind of talked about this already, the year over year to 19, a more normal year, I would maybe suggest doing that. Not necessarily from a standpoint of comps, but just, you know, what is a typical amount of sales to occur. And then I want to ask my friends out there who are with us that deal more in the townhome or condo market. I mean, what the heck is going on with that right now? Because if I look at this information and I'm seeing, you know, the pendings is great, but the decline in sales and the year over year changes, does anybody have any commentary on what they're seeing or feeling, or, you know, in the condo townhome market? Because it's not following along with a single family detached is why I ask. Let's see.
Todd, I can talk.
Yeah, Amy, go for it.
Yeah, I showed a really terrible $200,000 condo in Smyrna. Looked like it should have a match in the gas can, and it had probably 20 offers on it. So it's not following the same. It's, you know, these lower price point things people are still clamoring for, no matter what the condition is. So that's been crazy from what I've seen.
So that's interesting, because at that price point, you know, you can't even hardly find a single family detached for below 400, I would say, in the greater Atlanta area. So maybe people are making housing choices, the decision choices, and wishing they could get into the single family detached, but realizing that they can't afford it, so they're migrating to that. Is that what you think?
This is Sharon Oxman. I think it's more of these lower price point, that there are no rental restrictions in a lot of these properties, and everyone thinks they can be a landlord now. They're all, you know, companies, people, it's all over, you know, TikTok, how they're all making money in this rental business, becoming at Airbnbs. And I think that's been a whole new side hustle this past year or two that has really still going strong.
Okay. Sharon?
Todd, I can speak for the condos.
Yeah.
In Buckhead. I would say that I feel like the activity and the traffic coming through the condos that I deal with here in Buckhead, and the clients that I deal with that are looking for condos, is about the same. I do feel like the interest rate is making them question their price point, and generally the price point that I'm in is above 500. So I feel like the traffic's really good in the condo business.
Okay. All right. Well, that's why I asked.
Also, don't forget rental rate has jumped up.
Yeah, rental rate, Darlene, to your point, yeah, has increased significantly, which still, even though Atlanta in some markets has become unaffordable, according to the Fed, the rise in the percent increase in the rise of rental rates is still outpacing sales. So, good point. And I will say too, that, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Hey, just Bob. Hey, I'll just speak anecdotally on a townhome in Dunwoody. In one small community, there were a couple of listings that went about 10% above list price, closed in early May. New listing came on the market in late May. They decided they would jump over that 10% increase, probably went up to about 12% on their list price. And they've been sitting there for 2 weeks, about 3 showings, no offers. So completely different from those first 2 that went right away, just based on, goes back to Shay's point about, greedy sellers are maybe sitting on the market a little bit longer.
Yep. Okay. All great feedback. Thank you, everybody. So, all right. So let's talk about buyer impacts. And this slide might look a little scary and isn't necessarily intended for you to share with buyers you might be currently working with, but it is their reality and it is what's happened over the course of the last 2 years. But last month, according to NAR, 70% of all purchasers got a mortgage. So we saw a slight decline in the number of cash buyers. Now they might use one of those entities where they, can to get the cash up front, but they're doing some kind of mortgage eventually. So 3 out of 4 people, buyers in the marketplace, are getting a mortgage. So it's this reality is impacting those individuals. Since the pandemic, or since March of 2020, home prices in Atlanta have increased 40%. If you were to take the median sale price of a home in March, which this is the actual number, for all of FMLS, it was $265,000 was the median sale price of a home in 2020, March of 2020. Assuming a borrower puts down 20% down payment, and I know that, FHA and there's other options, but just stick with me for the illustration for a moment here. If a borrower put down 20%, that would mean that they would actually be borrowing $212,000 of the $265,000 sale price. The interest rate back in March of 2020 was 3.36%, which meant that their P&I, or their monthly principal and interest payment, not including taxes and insurance, was $935 a month. Let's flash forward now to March of this past, couple months ago. The median sale price for a home in all of FMLS is now $385,000. In order to put the same 20% down, that means they would be borrowing $308,000. And using an interest rate, and this was from a couple days ago when I went on to see what the interest rate of the day was. And I get it that, it depends, there's fluctuations depending on what their credit score is and everything else. This is just kind of using a baseline of 5.2%. The principal and interest payment is now almost $1,700. So if you take that number compared to the $935 from 2 years ago, the monthly cost of owning a home in today's economy has increased 80% in the last 2 years. Let that just sink in for a moment. So that's what the reality is for many buyers in the marketplace. So several of you might have been working with someone and now they're saying to you, either I've got to make a decision now instead of getting into the single family home, I've got to maybe think about going into the condo or the townhome for a couple years so I can save up more down payment, or I'm just out of the market right now. But even with all that, we saw the impacts of, the demand in May. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we continue through the summer months. And again, the volatility of the mortgage rates, I don't think we're going to see huge jumps again like we saw. But if you may have seen just over the last day or so, the Fed has suggested that they're going to still maybe incrementally increase the Fed funds rate, which doesn't necessarily have a direct correlation or impact to mortgage rates. It does so from the standpoint of it affects the stock market, which it then affects the 10-year treasury, which really is more what drives interest rates. But the other thing that they have said now is they're planning on their quantitative easing and unloading a lot of the debt that they have been taking on to kind of prop up the economy through the last couple of years. And that news set the stock market into a little bit of a tailspin when they announced that, because what that means is if they unload that debt, that means that the regular market has to want to have an appetite for it to absorb it. So it's going to be something to watch, but I mean, again, that would be having an impact. I don't think that we're going to see rates get above 6%, but the next couple of months are certainly going to be interesting to see what happens with the Fed and this quantitative easing and how much they decide to unload, and if they decide to increase the Fed funds rate, because it has an overall impact not only on our market here, but globally to the markets across the country. So, so what does all that mean for a buyer? Well, it really comes back to the statement I made earlier. It's a risk reward for buyers waiting to purchase. Instead of a buyer saying, well, should I wait? Should I try and time the market? Should I wait 6 months to see what, is going to happen? All I know is to maybe share this slide and let them make a determination on whether they're, they more risk reverse, or are they more reward, looking for the reward. Because if we know that right now the median sale price for a home in March was $385,000, and we do the illustration here, and it's a 5.2% interest rate, that means that the P&I is 1691. That's just pulling the information over from the previous slide. But let's assume, because remember, I just shared with you a couple slides ago that we're expecting, if again the data holds true, that we're going to see that the year-over-year increase in the median sale price increasing by 17.8%. But let's not even assume that that's accurate. Let's just assume that it's 10%. Okay, it's half of what more than half of what it was and has been historically running. We've been running at over 20% for the last 6 or 7 months. But let's just assume that appreciation gets cut in half and between now and March of 2023. And let's just assume it's 10%. So if we go from a median sale price of 385 and it only appreciates 10%, that means the appreciation equals the sale price of 423,500. They got to put 20% down. That's 338,800 that they're going to finance. And let's also assume that interest rates fall by 1% to 4.2%. The P&I is unchanged, more or less. It's $40 difference they potentially save. But that's, again, making a lot of assumptions that appreciation is going to be cut in half. Interest rates are going to drop from where they are by a percentage point, with all the dynamics I just mentioned with the Fed and quantitative easing and everything else. I don't know. I mean, that's where they're looking to you and say, well, what do you think is going to happen? What's the crystal ball? I don't know. I mean, what do you all think? I mean, for me, I would say to a buyer, if you can buy now, buy now. I don't know that I would wait to time the market, because there's a lot of factors that have to come into place. If you can't buy now, then you can't buy now. But if you're in a position to buy now, you're probably better off going and doing it now. So, and again, kind of one more thing there is, over the last 2 months, there has been an overall decline in the number of first-time home buyers relative to the market, but they're going to eventually need to have a home. They might be 26 now, but they're going to be moving through that staging of life to where they're going to need to have a home at some point in time. So if they have the capacity to do it now, I'd say do it now. I'd love to, again, open it up to all of you and get your thoughts on that and kind of all of the things that would have to happen. And what more than likely is going to happen is it's going to be more than 10% appreciation a year from now.
Hey, Todd.
Yep.
That scenario is not taking into account that with that, let's just say it's 10% appreciation, they've got to have, if they're making 20% down payment, they've got to pay an additional $7,700 in their down payment.
Yep. For sure.
Todd, I'd like to say that I've kind of been saying to my clients is that if you lock into a mortgage now, at least you do have a fixed payment monthly versus the same investor getting a loan. The rental rates are going to go up and the investor's cost is also going to go up. So at least you know that your mortgage would be fixed. And I think it's something that a lot of people would sleep better at night with.
Absolutely. And we haven't even mentioned the appreciation, right? That if they buy now, buy today, if they can get into a house and find the property and so forth and so on. You may recall the slide that was shared back in April. Over the next 5 years, the anticipated is 93,000 in equity in the property. So just again, food for thought, some talking points, maybe an illustration, if you have somebody who's kind of waffling or trying to decide what to do. But all right, then we're going to wrap up with just some things for sellers to watch, some kind of, I think markers in the market that you want to kind of try and keep an eye on. The first is, since 3/4 of all buyers get a mortgage, monitoring the changes in the mortgage applications is a good place to forecast future demand. And I've included the link here on kind of where every week they come out with kind of like, purchase applications, what the trend is and what's been going on there. And let me kind of just see if I can share with you what that looks like real quick. Okay, so everybody see this webpage here? Give me a nod, Bob. No,
Not yet.
not yet.
There it is. There it is.
You got it? Okay. So this is again from the, it's mortgage backed, the MBA mortgage applications. And you can see here, and the reason I wanted to pull it up is these two blue graphs that happened the end of April, beginning of May. They actually ticked up after interest rates. It was announced that they rose and went up, and then they really fell off in the second week of May. And then there's still declines. You may have seen in the media that, the mortgage apps have been on a steady decline. It was interesting that there was a little bit of a tick up there though. And I think that was a reaction of the market of like, you know what, I better go ahead and get this done now before rates even go higher. But this is a great place to see, kind of all it is how many people are applying to get a mortgage. And, if you have fewer people applying to get a mortgage, that's going to affect demand. So you can kind of forecast demand and what's happening there by watching this, since it's 75% of the overall market. The other thing I wanted to kind of just touch on as far as it relates to sellers is the percentage of price reductions of active inventory. Currently 27.7% is what we're running at right now. And when it gets over 35%, it's going to be signs of buyers' intolerance to current pricing. And so, watch that in terms of, how much of the active inventory is having to do a price reduction. Because if it was to get closer to 35%, that's going to be the top of the market in terms of have we reached what buyers are willing to pay. And then the total days on market compared to pendings and close, we're currently running at 46 days compared to 15. For me, that's signs of overpricing. So again, kind of watch that as those days on market go up and up and up. That's going to kind of be a sign too of the market leveling out. All right. And then last but not least, just some expectations moving forward. And you can see the expectations, correct? Next slide.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the Case-Shiller is going to likely continue to flatten in the coming months. It's not going to happen till late summer, early fall. Again, if the expectations of what closings will look like in June based on May pendings ends at 17%, you're going to start seeing that when the Case-Shiller reports for May, which would be in July. So that's why I say late summer, early fall. The headlines, remember, typically report national numbers. However, as we all know, real estate is very local. I would highly suggest you use your access to Trend Graphics and the reports in FMLS to your advantage. And then at the end here, I'll quickly show in Trend Graphics how you can go quickly grab that information I shared earlier. If interest rates remain above 5%, expect end of year sales unit declines around 9 to 10%. If they stay around 4, I think we're going to see them more around the 5 to 6%. But regardless of what happens there, prices are going to continue to appreciate. No matter, if it's 9 to 10% because we're above 5, or 5 to 6% because we're below 4. Prices are going to continue to appreciate. And then these are just kind of like some hypothetical questions to kind of finish us out with, and then I'll open it up to any questions or anything anybody else has. Is, are you fundamentally ready for listings to be on the market longer as we continue to go through the second half of 2022? And what is your messaging going to be? Because I do believe that you're going to have to be prepared to have more conversations with sellers who put their homes on their market where the expectation is that they get multiple offers within days, that doesn't end up being the case. Are you ready to have a conversation with them and explain maybe why the heyday that they've all been hearing about isn't necessarily the same heyday that we're in today? So again, just kind of throwing it out there. I'm sure your brokers would be happy to kind of help have a conversation about that. And then the last thing is, everybody has just been so busy trying to keep their heads above water with all the brisk activity from the last 2 years. Many of you have been expressing the market slowing down. I'm not as busy, whatever the case might be. So my only question is, how are you leveraging some of that downtime? Are you just kind of taking a breather, and which, in some cases may be very well earned, or are you using the time to refocus that time on your business versus being in the myriad of details of being in the business? So just kind of food for thought as you're kind of planning where you're going to go for the second half of 2022. I'll just open it up now to any other questions or additional commentary, if anybody has anything. Anybody? I know that was a lot of information. I hope you pulled away a couple of nuggets there, and enjoyed kind of the more interactive format of it, and kind of getting some feedback from others that are on the call right now. I'll send the recording out here. I'll send the slide deck out. I will quickly share for any of those that are interested. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. How to get into your trend graphics for those who have interest in that. Let's see, bear with me. I'm going to try and share a screen that you will be used to seeing. All right. Okay, can you see the trend graphics screen?
Yes.
Okay, so when you log into my H&R office, and I didn't show you that because I'm assuming everybody knows how to do that, but when you go in and you look at the drop-down menu, we have something called trend graphics. And if you click that, it's going to automatically pull up to this facts and trends of what's going on. And you can go in here, and if we wanted to see all FMLS counties, we could do that. We could do all residential. We could do single family detached. If you wanted to go in and just do a certain county, you could do the county. You can scroll down. You can do, for the 6 core county, you can do it by zip code. There's all sorts of different search features here. So let's just, for fun, since I'm sitting here in the home office, let's do Fulton County residential single family residence, and let's just kind of take a look and see what that looks like. And you can see how quickly you'll be able to get to this information that I was looking at before. Okay. So if you look here, basically this is just showing, and if you click that little data table icon, it'll show you all the data below. So if you look here though, this is basically showing us that this is the results so far, and it's showing June data right now because we rolled over into the new month, but it will on the 10th of the month start reflecting May information in this data table below. But this is where you would want to come and you can see today's stats. So if you're interested from a for sale standpoint, there's 12.3% more homes on the market June of this year versus May of the previous month, and you can kind of see what the percent change on a year-over-year basis. Those numbers will change as we get through the month as data becomes added to the information there. So just wanted to share that real quick. And then I saw we had a couple of things in the chat. Let's see. All right. I don't see any questions. So unless anybody does have anything else, we will let you go. And I hope that, again, you found the information helpful. And we'll probably do this again. We'll do it again for sure in July when we kind of do the Q2 recap. But enjoyed having you guys here, and have a great rest of your week and weekend, and a great rest of the half of 2022. Okay.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Todd.
We'll see you later.
Thanks, Todd.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Todd.
My pleasure. We'll see you later, Mary Ellen. Enjoy the beach.
Oh, yeah.